Hey guys, what's up, and welcome back to another Koze Daily Review. Today I wanted to talk about a highly requested topic, and that is perfectionism. This is not a topic that I've really kind of dove into in terms of my own personal experience with it, but it is something that I have personally experienced. And so I guess given that, I'll just go ahead and make the disclaimer that I'm only talking today from my own personal experience and what I've learned from my own battle with just being a bit of a perfectionist. Now, depending on the scale of this, if you've ever dealt with being a perfectionist before, the answers or like the experience for you might be a little different, but this is exactly my experience with it and basically how I've helped overcome my own kind of perfectionistic brain. So just to give you guys a little bit of a quick backstory in terms of how I have dealt with like my own, I guess, battle of being a perfectionist in general. I think that this is something that I've dealt with for a longer period of time, but it's come about in ways that are very interesting to me. For instance, I feel like I've dealt with being a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to what society expects of me. By that I mean what society deems to be perfect is something that I think we all kind of can relate and struggle to, because we're constantly flooded with images of what it means to be beautiful, of what it means to be just perfect. And there's this idea of what perfectionism is, and I feel like it's constantly kind of portrayed, whether it's through like advertising, whether it's through just social media or whatever it is. And I definitely can say that that has affected my own self-esteem in a lot of ways. And I started to assume that there were things that I wanted for myself, or assume that there were things that I needed, not even wanted, just like needed for myself or needed to be in order to be like accepted and in order to consider myself to be, you know, perfect. And that has really messed with my mindset before. And I feel like it's made me take a big step back and be aware of what I actually consider to be something that I, like a bar that I hold myself to, and what is a bar that I hold myself to that isn't by choice of like, I've decided that this is something that I want to like be accountable for. It's more so something that society has told me I should be accountable for. I can dive more into that topic if you guys want to do a whole like society perfectionism type of talk, but today is just going to be more general. That said, I've also dealt with my own standard of perfectionism and what I have basically held myself to, in the sense of just knowing that, for instance, like there's a version of me that just nails this or is perfect at doing this. And so that can, you know, get out of balance, and it has gotten out of balance for me before, in the sense of constantly expecting myself to show up as the most perfect version of myself no matter what I was showing up to do. So that could even just be, you know, running out to go grab coffee. Like there was a time in my life where I couldn't leave the house without like actually putting like a full just existence on, and just thinking that I couldn't do anything, I couldn't go be anywhere unless I was, you know, the best version of myself, and I was always arriving as the best version of myself and all of that. The only thing is that the whole best version of yourself is not an external thing, it's an internal thing. And it took me a really long time to realize that I didn't have to hold myself to these crazy unrealistic standards, or, you know, constantly be put together all the time, or constantly, even just in the internal version of that, feeling like, you know, the most perfect version of myself would never have to deal with bad emotions. I would never feel sad. I would never feel lazy. I would never procrastinate. And these are just unrealistic standards, because I'm human, just like we all are. And so humans, we're gonna feel like crap some days, and we're just gonna procrastinate some days, and we're not always gonna choose the best thing. And so there was definitely a point in my life where I struggled with any day that I woke up and didn't feel like eccentric and just feel super happy, automatically I felt like a failure. And so that kind of perfectionistic mindset of like, I have to feel perfect, I have to look perfect, I have to be perfect, I have to do perfect all the time, was my own standard that I had created for myself that was also very unhealthy. And then in turn, that ended up leading into like my daily routines, my daily habits, where it started to become a thing where if I didn't have the most perfect day, if I didn't completely follow through on my routine exactly according to plan, just little tiny things like that would completely shift and alter the way that I felt like the rest of the day. And I'm talking like tiny little mediocre things, like not having time to go for a walk with Bentley, or like waking up a little later in the day. Like if I told myself I'd be up by like 6 and then I end up waking up at like 7 or 8 or 9, I instantly would just be like, today's a fail. It wouldn't necessarily be like I'm not perfect, but it would definitely be like I already felt like I was failing before I had even begun my day, and that would really alter like my mindset going through the day. And it made me very just like strict on myself and put so much pressure on myself that it caused me to miss out on a lot of, first of all, like important moments in life where, for instance, if I was doing something that was considered to be like leisure, like relaxing with friends or whatever, just like going home for the weekend to Kingston and like hanging out with family, like I felt like I should be working. I felt like I should always be doing something productive. And anytime, like even when I was home, there was like a big stretch of time where I kid you not, could not sit down and watch TV. Like just the thought of sitting down and watching TV made me feel anxious because it felt like I wasn't doing something. It felt like I wasn't being productive. And that at the time I didn't realize was not just anxiety, it was also anxiety stemming from this perfectionistic mindset of like, to sit down and watch TV was considered unperfect in my eyes for whatever stupid reason. And so it was like one of these things that I didn't outwardly know that all of the ways that I was feeling because of this mindset was stemming from my need to constantly be what I considered to be perfect, but it definitely started to affect my life. The thing about being a perfectionist is that all of it stems under the same simple fear, and that fear is the fear of failing. And that whole fear of failing is basically what trickles into all of the avenues of your life and then suddenly makes it feel like you are almost kind of like, you're almost cutting yourself off at the throat. You're like, you can't even start anything, you can't even go to do anything because if it's not already perfect, you're just like overwhelmed by the thought of it. So it could be even as simple as like, today I want to go for a run. Well, if my run today isn't faster than my run yesterday, and like you're starting to spin out and you're starting to freak out. And like if halfway through your run, like I don't know if you guys get updates when you're working out, this is just an example, but if halfway through your run, it's like, oh, you are running an average pace of this, and you can automatically hear that it's like slower than yesterday, the rest of your run is ruined. These types of things would literally happen to me, and I did not realize that I guess I was being so hard on myself, or that I was being just so rigid, just so like unforgiving. And it's not cool to constantly be holding yourself under so much pressure and to have all of this expectation of yourself and of the world all the time to be so perfect. In a lot of ways, it's basically just like you feel like you need to absolutely control everything, but not only control it, but control the outcome. And that just takes all the fun out of life. I think that the way to get out of that, the first and foremost tip that I have is to find like the beauty and the lessons in your fails and in your struggles. It's okay to fail. It's okay to struggle. In fact, it is important to fail and it's important to struggle, because if there wasn't any fails, there wouldn't be any success. And if there was no struggle, there wouldn't be any kind of like ease. There wouldn't be any ease or like comfort or gratification. So we have to fail and we have to struggle, and we have to be okay with failing and struggling, because a lot of the times, if you end up looking back on your life, there may be some things that you pointed out as a failure at one point that actually ended up pivoting and shifting the course of your life to a new success. So it's all part of the yin and yang. There's a little bit of good in every bad, and there's a little bit of bad in every good. It's not so black and white. Nothing is ever 100% perfect, and nothing is ever 100% a failure either. And getting my brain to basically comprehend that was the first step in releasing this hold I had on myself of always needing to be perfect. Another important question is to ask, has being so self-deprecating helped me be better in the past? Because most times the answer to that is definitely no. And that was the hardest one, I think, for me to wrap my head around, is because I thought that if I would basically beat myself mentally, just basically self-deprecating, like just being like, you are a horrible person for doing this, or you were such a failure, like next time you better do better, and like that kind of self-talk, thinking that being hard on myself was going to help me basically do better next time. No, it never works out that way. The harder you are on yourself, the harder you're gonna find it is to do anything. And so asking yourself, like, has talking to myself this way ever helped me be any better in the past? Because the answer is usually no, at least not in an authentic way. And then the last question to ask yourself is 80-year-old me gonna give a shit about this? Because odds are, probably not. I picture 80-year-old me just being so woke, being so wise, and anytime I'm ever struggling with anything, at least as of lately, I actually picture myself sitting down on a front porch. I don't know why it's the front porch from The Walking Dead. You know, in The Walking Dead, this is like the earlier seasons when, oh my God, I forget his name, but he's like the farmer and he's got the daughters, and it's like that white farmhouse and they have that front porch, or maybe even kind of like picture the front porch from The Notebook when the White House, blue shutters, a big old deck that wraps around the whole thing. That kind of deck. I don't know why. That's where I picture my 80-year-old self chilling, and I'll go up and I'll take a seat beside her, grab a cup of coffee, and I'll literally be like, yo, should I care about this? And 9 times out of 10, she's like, hell freaking no, you shouldn't. Like, anything you're arriving to go do, is it gonna matter to 80-year-old you? And if you don't know, then ask 80-year-old you. Envision yourself when you're 80, looking back on your life, what would that version of you tell you? Because 9 times out of 10, they tell you to chill the F out and just have fun and to stop stressing so much about it or putting all these unrealistic expectations and pressure on yourself and on your life. The key to the doorway of being a perfectionist is acceptance. And that sounds way easier said than done, probably because it is. But the thing is that the minute that you learn to give yourself some wiggle room, the minute that you learn to accept that failure is often part of success and that there is no such thing as perfect, you let yourself breathe. You take that whole, just all that pressure off your shoulders and you allow yourself to live. Thing is, when you idealize what you consider to be perfect or perfection, you become majorly self-critical. And not only that, you become majorly critical of other people because you're not willing to accept things about yourself. You're not willing to accept that, you are gonna have days where you're feeling a little lazy, or you are gonna have days where it's not your best work. And because of that, because of the self-resistance, because of being like, I refuse to accept that, we also tend to start refusing to accept it in other people too. So then we'll start pointing out flaws in other people that are actually the biggest fears of flaws within ourselves, and it makes us not fun to be around. You'll notice that if there's something that you consider to be unperfect, you'll start noticing it in all these other people, and you'll be afraid of it. You'll be like refusing to accept it from other people because you're so refusing to accept it from yourself, and that makes you a rigid person. It makes you no fun to be around. It's like you're just a damp sponge. No one wants to chill with someone that's constantly picking out flaws in other people, and no one wants to chill with someone that's constantly picking out the flaws within themselves. There's this thing I want you to Google if you do struggle with this, and if you haven't heard of this before, maybe you already have, but it is a loving kindness meditation. This is going to be like that pivotal point that'll get you from thinking this way to thinking the right way. Not the perfect way, the right way. The loving kindness meditation, it's something that I read in one of my books earlier. We've talked about it a few times here. Even my therapist has brought it up to me, and I'm like, oh, I love that meditation, but it can be done in a few different ways. But basically what it is it helps you bring up feelings of kindness and connect it to yourself. And whether you have to do it in terms of talking to your younger self, or first you find the loving kindness for a pet or someone that you love, like a family member or a good friend, and then you spin it on yourself, it just makes it so much easier to accept yourself, and it makes it so much easier to give yourself some grace and a little wiggle room to accept the flaws in yourself and to see that they actually balance out who you are as an individual and as a human being on this planet. You are worth your love and acceptance, no matter what is left undone, no matter what you deem to be a failure, no matter what didn't go the way you thought it would, or no matter what your expectations were and then what actually ended up being. You always deserve your loving kindness. You always deserve your acceptance, no matter what. Because if you basically make it that the only way that you're allowed to accept yourself and love yourself is if you meet a certain criteria, that's just so unhealthy for your self-esteem. It's so unhealthy for just who you are, and you should be able to love yourself even if you don't meet your standards or meet your expectations for the day. You should be able to love and accept yourself no matter where you are, starting right where you're at right now, because that is where, I don't want to like contradict myself by saying true perfection lies, but in a lot of ways I think that I'll go as far as saying the way to perfectly love yourself is to do that, is to love yourself regardless, to love yourself the way that God loves you or whatever you believe in loves you, because they love you for solely what you are, who you are, and all the things you've done and have yet to do on this earth, because that's the kind of love we all deserve, especially from ourselves. Let life get a little messy sometimes, and know that it's okay to like let go of that sense of control or the need to, see a specific sort of outcome. Then we limit our lives. We limit ourselves to living our lives in such a linear way that we don't see opportunity and we don't see pockets of inspiration and motivation, and we don't make connections that we would have made if we allowed ourselves to just kind of laugh it off sometimes. And then not only that, follow up that forgiveness by noticing something that you uniquely love about yourself or about other people or whatever situation it is that you're in. By that I mean, what's a personality trait that you have that you just tend to like? Or what is, the way that you take your coffee? What's a memory that you have from when you were a kid that if you were like anyone else, you wouldn't have that memory? And that makes it a lot easier to see that who you are, given all the good and all the bad, all the flaws and all the, strengths, you'll see that you are allowed to be accepted and loved as exactly who you are, because if you were any other way or any different, you wouldn't have these unique little things about you that are actually some of your favorite quirks. My final tip when it comes to dealing with perfectionism is to basically give yourself a comforting routine or a comforting ritual that'll help you just get things started and move forward in your life. I know that for me, when it comes to going to do something, whether it's film a video, edit a video, write catching, I dealt with it a lot with Catcher, is thinking that just the thought of having to do it, I was already there's just this level of perfection I pictured it being at, and if it doesn't get there, it's not going to be worth it for me. So instead, what I did is I learned to create a ritual that would get me into the writing groove. Basically, instead of sitting there with writer's block because I was so afraid or just holding such an expectation of what I was going to write, it was I need it to be like liquid silk, just pouring out onto these pages. Instead, I was it can be shit as long as I just fix it up later and work on it later, as long as I just get some words on the page. So coming up with a comforting ritual or a comforting routine that helps you push past that little roadblock of that little perfectionistic thought coming in is going to help you counteract it and jump over it. So sometimes, I know for me when it came to writing Catcher, it was literally making a coffee or having a drink and sitting up just a whole situation, getting super cozy, putting my headphones on, putting my specific playlist that I had, I'd made it specifically for writing, and then just tuning in and just going. And setting everything up like that every time I sat down to write Catcher, it made it so that no matter what I wrote down, even if it sucked, even if I ended up deleting that whole chapter, which most of the time I actually never did, it got way more done than me just sitting there being oh my God, here's the standard I'm holding it to. And I know that if I sit down and write, I don't feel like I'm at that standard today, so I feel like everything I write is going to be below it, so it's just on an automatic fail. Why even waste my time? That was what my brain would do. Instead, it was okay, even if I sit down and I write stuff that's here, that's fine, because at least I wrote some stuff down, and then when I go back at it, I can bring it back up a little bit more and bring it up a little bit more or whatever. But just knowing that I had that ritual helped me get into the groove of doing things instead of being stuck and choked by my need for everything to be so perfect. That's my input. Let me know, have you guys ever dealt with any kind of perfectionistic thoughts before, and what has it held you back from? What has it stopped you from? Was it society's standards of being perfect that has held you back? Is it your own standard of being perfect that's held you back? Just let me know your story down below. If you guys ever want me to dive into a deeper video on this topic, a longer one, then let me know. I can either do a podcast or a longer coffee talk on this channel given next month. And aside from that, I'll talk to all of you guys tomorrow morning. Bye guys.